In this video, I'm going to be talking about the basic differences between primary and secondary sources. Um, and I've pulled up an example of each. We have a primary source on the left and a secondary source on the right. Both of these just happen to be my own articles simply because I had them readily available on my computer. Um, but if you're not familiar with these terms, primary versus secondary sources, a primary source is going to be a scholarly research article published in a scholarly journal where researchers are presenting and describing their own research. Um, so there's going to be data presented, it's going to be technical, usually very specific topic, whereas a secondary source is going to, it can still be quite technical and still be quite specific, but a secondary source is not going to present any new data, so it's going to be a summary of those primary sources typically. Um, so in this case, the secondary source shown here on the right is what would be called a review article. That's very, very common to find reviews. And in this review article, it is summarizing, a number of new primary sources that all came out, within a year or 6 months of each other, and talking about how that contributes to that particular field. Whereas in the primary source, if I scroll down here, uh, we'll see lots of data being presented, the results, etc. And now both of these types of articles can be very, very useful, and I would anticipate for introduction to research uh, class, for putting together your research proposal, you're probably going to want to utilize both of these. And I should say, ideally, if you're putting together something like a research proposal or a big paper, ideally you would like to reference the primary sources whenever possible. Those are going to be more definitive and better to reference than the secondary source. But that being said, reviews, those secondary sources can be really, really useful in terms of helping orient yourself to a new field, get a foothold. Right? You're kind of reading a summary, and you're having lots of those primary sources referenced in these reviews. So these can be a really great place to start, and I would certainly recommend, if you're new to a field, um, try to find some reviews in that field if you can. Start there, and then those will lead you into some of those primary sources. So how do you know what you've got? How do you know if you find an article, you're doing a database search? How do you know if it's a primary or a secondary source? Um, in terms of the secondary sources, if it's a review, oftentimes it will clearly say review, as you can see here at the top of this article. So look for that. If you see that, okay, this is a secondary source. Sometimes it may not be super obvious depending on the format of that particular journal. Um, so what I always tell students, really the dead giveaway is to look and see if there is a methods or a materials and methods section or not. And if we look at the primary article on the left here, if I scroll down for this particular journal, I believe the methods is at the very end. Yeah, here it is. You have this materials and methods section, and this is where the specific experiments that were conducted, the details of those experiments are being described and outlined, so that if somebody wanted to try to repeat those experiments, they should be able to do that from the methods section. Or if they just want to look and see exactly how something was done, they can check that there. So every primary source should have a methods section, whereas a secondary source, because it's not talking about experiments that the authors conducted themselves, do not have method sections. So let me come back up to the top here. Um, at first glance, if we just look at the front page of these two articles, we see they look very similar, right? They both have technical titles, the authors, information. They both start with an abstract and an introductory section. But if we look at the contents here on this review, we'll see that there is no method section at all. And certainly if I was to scroll through it, you're not going to find that method section anywhere. You may find some figures. So for example, this particular review has at least one figure, but that figure is not really presenting new data, right? It's just trying to help illustrate the concepts that are being discussed in that review. So again, just to summarize, primary source is going to be authors talking about their own research. Secondary source is going to be authors talking about somebody else's research. And as I said, both of these can be very useful, but ideally you would like to be referencing primary sources in your documents, in your proposals. So that's what I would tend to shoot for. So anyway, that's all I've got for you. Hopefully that may help clarify some of the differences, and use that trick of looking for a method section if you're really not totally sure what the particular article that's in front of you, if you're not sure which category it falls into. Look for the method section. If you see it, you know you're dealing with a primary source.